coming from a young black male that is alive in 2020, I think my voice has the utmost power to change the powers that be. We do not fight against flesh and blood, the Bible says. We fight against principalities, powers, wickedness in high places. George Orwell said, in a world of universal deceit, telling the truth is a universal act. And my desire is to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. The number one problem in this country is definitely in the black community, not police violence. Is the number of children who are raised without a father. That's the number one issue in the black community. I think Thomas Sowell says it 10 times better. He's like, the reason so many people misunderstand so many issues is not that these issues are hard or complex to understand. They're not. He's like, people just don't want a factual or analytical explanation that leaves them emotionally unsatisfied.
If we wanted to be serious about evidence, we might compare where blacks stood 100 years after the end of slavery with where they stood after 30 years of the liberal welfare state.
Yeah. Well, in 1960, which would be almost 100 years after the end of slavery, 22% of black kids grew up in homes with only one parent. 30 years later, after the liberal welfare state, that number had more than tripled. Speculated on how much that 22% was due to the legacy of slavery. But we know that that tripling was not due to the legacy of slavery. It was due to the legacy of a whole different set of policies. The housing projects in the first half of the 20th century, during that first 100 years after slavery, did not have the high crime rates, the murder rates, the graffiti, all the rest of it we associate. None of that was there. And you can look at it so many other ways. Dunbar High School in Washington, which was an elite black high school for a very long time. In 1993, the number of kids out of Dunbar High School who went on to college was less than it was 60 years earlier, which would have been in the depth of the Great Depression.
In 1960, 60% of Americans said they would never vote for a black president. Almost 50 years later, the black man who said racism is in America's DNA was elected president. And 4 years later, re-elected. That's only the most obvious example of racial progress.
It sure doesn't feel worse than when I grew up in Jim Crow, Alabama. Okay, so let's drop this notion that we're worse at race relations today than we were in the past, really. That means we've made no progress. About how much worse it is isn't doing us any good. We still have, this country is never going to be colorblind. We had the initial original sin of slavery. It's still with us.
Is there still racism in America? Of course there is. But racism is not in America's DNA. Recent history and a lot of research and data prove it. As William H. Fry of the Brookings Institution wrote, sociologists have traditionally viewed multiracial marriage as a benchmark for the ultimate stage of assimilation of a particular group into society. Black-white marriages were still illegal in 16 states until 1967, and a 1958 Gallup poll found that only 4% of Americans approved of black-white marriages. Today, that number is 87%. In 1960, of all marriages by blacks, only 1.7% were black-white. Today, it's 12% and rising.
But because people don't want to talk about that, because we are much more prone to only listen and believe what the narrative on the mainstream media is telling us, that's what we're going to believe. We're not going to challenge. We're not going to critically think. We're not going to wonder if this is true. We're not going to check out the facts. We're not going to look at the statistics. We're going to choose feelings over facts and allow Black Lives Matter and other organizations that are funded by George Soros, once again, to lead and guide our thinking.
Here's what I disagree with you on. I actually, because I've done so much studying the numbers, I disagree with the idea that there's police brutality that is disproportionately affecting Black Americans. I don't disagree with you on the fact that Black Americans are disproportionately being locked up. But what I disagree with you on why, it's nothing to do with, in my opinion, because we're Black. Like, we're not, there's no sentence that you get 20 years because you're Black, but there is economic privilege in this country. And if you're rich and you can get a great lawyer and you can get off, then great. But the Black community is economically depressed.
Why?
Because we continue to vote for people that are economically depressing us.
And you may have heard me testify in front of Congress, is the illiteracy rates that are facing Black America.
75% of black boys in California can't pass a reading exam. Across Baltimore, they looked at 5 schools. They couldn't find a single black boy that was a single black child that could pass a basic reading or a math exam. So I caught a lot of slack because I said, this is the Democrat plantation, but I meant what I said. If you look historically at what the plantations were when we were slaves, there were 3 things that were necessary for them to run. The first was our ignorance. Black Americans were not allowed to learn how to read unless we would have our limbs chopped off. And that was because an educated mind cannot be enslaved. So the fact that our schools are in this condition in the inner cities and all throughout America and not a single candidate is talking about it is problematic to me. I think that that's a huge negotiating tool for me. We need to be talking about the inner city schools. Another component, and this is the biggest issue that I think is facing Black America today, which was important to maintaining the plantations, was the breakdown of family. The biggest issue facing Black America is father absence. We have children that are growing up without their fathers in the home, and that is being incentivized by the government right now via the welfare system. When the government says we'll give you more money if you don't marry the father of your children, you are incentivizing bad behavior in our community. What happens when you remove a father from the home? This is why I do not mess with feminism at all. I'm not with it. This breakdown and mocking masculinity, making it seem like there's something wrong to be a man, all of this contributes to the breakdown of family. When you remove...
y'all, hey, hold on. So, hold on, brother, hold on. There's going to be an opportunity for each of you to engage, but I want to make sure this sister has the right to talk while she's here. That's why we invited her. So
It's
let
okay.
her say what's...
Now,
Hold on. I want to finish this.
This is on your behalf. At a certain point, these are black men and women, and in particular, these are black women. Like, it doesn't matter how you feel about her personally, but you cannot take the truth and be mad at who tells it to you. So just chill, bruh. Let her say it and receive the information. That's it.
Thank you so much for
Listen.
saying what
I want
was
you to continue because I was listening.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been turned into public enemy number 1. I say the same thing when I hit every stage. The single motherhood rate in the black community in the 1960s, before Lyndon Baines Johnson started the Great Society Act, was 23%. At that time, that was considered very high. 23% of black people growing up without a father in the home. The single motherhood rate in the black community today is 74%. 74% of our children are growing up without a father in the home. It was Barack Obama. What happens when you remove a father from the home? You're 9 times more likely to end up in prison. You're 6 times more likely to drop out of high school, and you're 12 times more likely to lead a life of poverty. Why is nobody talking about father absence, and why do we keep being silenced when we actually do? This is what black conservatism is, by the way. It's really not. It's not that controversial.
So let me...
When you thought the average white guy was a racist?
Yes, but I was really, really young. I was in class, and I felt that the teacher was, paying more attention to me than she should have otherwise been.
She paid more attention to you?
Yes.
You mean in a disciplinary way?
Very much so. And so I came home and I screamed to my parents, she just doesn't like me because I'm black.
What grade were you in?
4th grade.
You told your parents, what did they say?
And they said, no, she has a problem with you because you won't sit still in your seat and shut up. So, now mind you, my parents didn't take that as an answer because they both grew up in the Jim Crow South. So they had a very real understanding of what actual racism looked like and sounded like.
Just a study, University of Washington. And it turns out cops were more reluctant, more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect. Probably because of the fear of being accused of racially profiling and the fear that the civil rights establishment was going to come down on them. So if anything, whites are more likely to be shot by a cop under certain circumstances than a black person. And in the last 30 or 40 years, the percentage of suspects killed by cops who are black has declined 75%. However, the percentage of whites killed by cops has flatlined.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, people are more concerned about shooting black people for fear that they're going to be called racist. The idea that a racist white cop and shooting unarmed black people is a peril to black people is BS. Homicides in this country are committed by and against black people. Last year, there were 14,000 homicides. Not talking about suicides. I'm talking about homicides. Half of them were black, 96% of them black on black of that 7,000. Where's the Black Lives Matter people on that? Where's the evidence of the lack of social justice? In Baltimore, where Freddie Gray was killed, Freddie Gray died in a van, I shouldn't say was killed, died in a van.
Yeah.
You have a city that's 45% black. City council is 100% Democrat. The majority of city council is black. The top cop at the time was black. The number 2 cop was black. The majority of the command staff is black. The mayor is black. The AG is black. And yet here we are talking about racism. I mean, it's
can't
absurd.
even get out of our own way when it comes to seeking progress. I've heard many times how today's riots have been compared to the King assassination riots or the riots that were going on in 1963 in Birmingham. Did those riots bring about a result that they wanted? Absolutely. But we're only looking at one element of those riots today. The element we keep overlooking is the leadership that took place during that time. King knew that the black community was upset, but he also knew that throwing a tantrum wasn't going to do anything as well. So simultaneously, he went around to different pool halls, different pubs to talk to the black community and to get them to stop rioting, while he was negotiating with JFK and communicating with him on what they needed to do. And this is where we mess up. Any black leader that has actually went to Trump office and tried to negotiate or talk on behalf of the black community has either been ostracized or counseled. We saw what happened to Steve Harvey, Kanye West, and others. So for that reason, I don't think these riots are going to yield the same results. And it's going to be our fault.
Works. We are a republic. That means local government has the most power over citizens' lives. The photos of you before you became president, and you were taking pictures with Snoop, and you were taking pictures with all the icons of hip hop. You did that, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you did that because you saw capitalists. You saw branders, you saw entrepreneurs, you saw people that were willing to take a chance and make things grow. That is us. That is the black community. And I would like to see a challenge from you to see how many in the black community can put their names on the side of a building coming out of this. If we're really going to reshape and reform the way that we do this, issue that challenge, because that's what we need more now than ever when it comes to things like education, because we are not able to get quality choice into our communities because we don't have any position or power on our school boards to be able to fight for those things, and not just to get charters in, but to also bring some kind of reformation to the public school system as it stands too.
I had to work twice as hard just to survive and then thrive in school, in schools that were subpar, in schools that put me on a path to go to jail as opposed to college.
Oh, I agree with you about the education system. We can get into that, but
and
again,
these identity politics and this polarizing culture where we just can't say, hey, that's a good man or that's a good woman. That person can't be good or do good things if they're on the opposite side of the political spectrum to me. Obama, I love Obama, but I had a lot of problems with his administration. Okay. Now, I do not like Donald Trump, but I say, wow, thank you for the First Step Act. I say, why didn't the Democrats do that when they had the power? You see the balance in this thing?
So for me, you got some of the most educated and the people that have, you talked about breaking barriers. That's why I brought them up. People that have broken barriers, and yet our community has rejected them because our goals have been reset culturally. We have a community that wants to uplift and hail LeBron James when he puts on a Beto cap, a community that wants to hail Colin Kaepernick when he takes the knee, and then a community that rejects Clarence Thomas, who makes it to the Supreme Court, that rejects Dr. Ben Carson, a community that rejects Dr. Condoleezza Rice, who literally made it from times that you could not make it as a black person because they're old. You know what I'm saying?
Way to employ more people that you feel are underrepresented in the country?
No, I employ people that I believe will do the best job. It's to employ people based on their skin color. But what I'm saying is, just because somebody says something rude to you, like calls you the N-word, that does not affect your ability to make money. But I believe that there's no better country to be a person of color than America. If you find a better country, I would love to hear about it.
Do you think that race plays a part in wealth distribution, or either a mindset that you can't or
Today?
cannot? Yeah.
No.
You don't?
No, I don't. I don't. You and I, we're proof. Why would race have anything to do with it? Put your mind to what you want to do and go for that. It's a good excuse for not.
As liberal Harvard sociologist Orlando Patterson said, America is now the least racist white majority society in the world, has a better record of legal protections of minorities than any other society, white or black, offers more opportunities to a greater number of black persons than any other society, including all of those of Africa. Patterson, by the way, is black.